So yesterday, I did something just for you. After work at about 3 p.m., I drove for just about 4.5 hours, slept in my car, woke up before dawn, so that I could answer the question, does what side you part your hair on actually matter? And if so, are you parting your hair on the correct side? And if you know me, you know that I'm going to take you on adventures while I teach you about hair, and this adventure takes us into one of the most incredible places I've ever seen. So, let's go explore while I teach you about hair. Okay, in just a second, you're gonna know exactly why these views are ridiculous and they don't suck. But let me just explain how this video is gonna go. So first off, I'm gonna talk about just the different kinds of partings and some pros and cons to them and some things you need to be aware of depending on your face shape. And then at the end, I'm gonna go through some tips, some kind of generalized tips about parts that you're gonna wanna know because it's gonna help you determine what parting would be the best for you. And I'll tell you, there's some things that you probably didn't know. So let's dive into the tips. Do you see what I'm saying? Oh my, this place is absolutely absurd. I mean, it's ridiculous. The views are probably some of the best views I've ever seen. Okay, actually, do you want to see over the side, see what it looks like, see the view? You think I'm getting near that thing? Watch. Here. Okay. I'm gonna throw up. Anyway, so first of all, let's talk about parting your hair down the center. Center parts can be fantastic, but there are some things that you want to pay attention to. Now, the first thing to think about is center parts work really well if your face is super symmetrical, okay? If your face isn't symmetrical, it's going to draw attention to what's not symmetrical. Now, that may or may not be an issue for you, but if you feel like something's bothering you, maybe one eye is set lower than the other eye, or maybe your smile is off, or whatever it may be, you do want to pay attention to the fact that that center part is going to draw more emphasis to that. You also want to think that if you have a fuller face, many times a center part doesn't allow for a lot of volume on the top because it sits in the center, and it can create the illusion of more volume on the sides. If you've got a fuller face, it could draw the illusion of more fullness to the face and accentuate what you're not trying to accentuate. Okay, now I'm gonna go back to enjoying this view and trying not to fall off of this rock right here. And yeah, in just a second, we'll talk about side parts, because there's a lot of info about those. Okay, I'm not saying that this view has a view of every single mountain in Oregon, and I feel like even in Washington, but 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. No. Let's talk about side parts. So first of all, there's a couple kinds of side parts. Well, there's more than a couple, but there's two main types of side parts. First one is a dramatic side part where it's parted from one side in the front straight to the back. Then there's the more diagonal side parting where you're parting it from the front and you're taking that parting diagonally back more towards the center of the crown. So there are pros and cons to both of those, but you definitely want to pay attention to the difference between them and why you might choose one over another. So here's a couple things that you want to pay attention to. First of all, the side part in general, regardless of which way you decide to go, is going to be beneficial to masking any sort of asymmetry. If you feel like your face is a little asymmetrical and it bothers you, a side part may be the way to go for you because, like I said, it will hide that asymmetry. It won't draw emphasis to it like a center part will. Now, another thing you want to think about is, let's say you have an eyebrow that you like more than the other eyebrow, right? Or maybe there's a side of your face that you like more. If you part your hair on that side, it's going to draw more emphasis to that, so that may be a good choice for you. Now, one thing you want to pay attention to is if you're doing the extreme side part where it's parted straight back and not diagonally towards the crown, you want to recognize that that is going to create the illusion of a lot more hair on whatever side you're parting it to. So if you part to one of the sides, you're going to see a lot more volume and hair on that side. that may be what you want, and in that scenario, fantastic. But if it's not what you're looking for, you definitely want to pay attention to it so that you don't make that mistake. Now, the other option would be, again, parting it from the front all the way back to diagonally back to the back of the crown. That's going to give you the side part and help with the asymmetry, but also create roughly the same amount of hair on both sides, so it's going to look a little bit more even in terms of volume. Now, the other thing you want to pay attention to on side parts is many times side parts will create or can create a little bit more volume right in the middle. And that means that if you've got a fuller face, this can help to offset that fullness and create a little bit more elongation. However, if you've got an extremely long face and that bothers you and you're trying to create a little bit more fullness, this may, depending on how it's layered, take some of that away because of that volume that it could potentially add right in the front. So you definitely want to be aware of that as well. Now I'm going to go back to looking at these 476 mountains that are behind me. And then when we come back, I'm going to walk you through some things that you're going to want to know, regardless of what side you part, just about parting in general, so that you can make the best decision for yourself. All right, well for now, this place is ridiculous. Back to the hike. Okay, check that out. So they call that monkey face. Apparently it looks like a monkey's face. And then people climb that thing on purpose. I call them crazy. Okay, anyway, so I want to give you a couple real quick tips, and then I'm going to share some more really important tips that I guarantee almost positively you didn't know. So that'll be in a second. But right now, tips just in general about parting your hair. So one thing you want to pay attention to is the fact that if you flip it back and forth, you're likely to find, because you're going against natural hair growth or the way that your hair has been trained over time, if you've been parting it to one side for a long time, you'll find that you're going to get more volume. Now, where that's beneficial would be if you are in a situation where you have maybe, like we talked about earlier, a little bit of a wider face shape and you want to create a little bit of extra volume on top. Well, that's an easy way to create a little bit of volume and help to elongate the face. Now, another scenario though is if you have a harder time controlling your bangs and you want them to come off of your face, a little bit of volume, especially at the root, will help to actually create a little bit of that control, which can help you get them off the face. So that might be something you want to pay attention to. Another thing you want to think about is color. If your color is done a certain way, then you won't see a variation in color regardless of what side you part it to. However, if you are parting your hair one side all the time and you go in and you get it colored and they color it for that part, then you flip it to the other side, you might see a variation in color and you may or may not like that. So what I would recommend is making sure that when you go to your stylist, let them know, are you parting your hair on one side all the time? Do you flip it back and forth? Because depending on how they place, especially if you're doing highlights, depending on how they place those highlights, that could be affected. So pay attention to that, and then, yeah, I'm gonna go show you guys another view in just a second, and I'm gonna try not to fall on this trail because I'm a little bit terrified. How cool is that rock right there? That rock is massive, and the only thing that I can think is that it fell down from these cliffs over here and landed there, God knows how long ago, but that is a massive rock. But a cool little river view, right? Like, this place just has tons of different kinds of views. I love it. Okay, so my last tip that I almost guarantee you didn't know. Have you ever gone, you got your haircut, went home, styled it, and felt like it was really uneven on one side? There was more layers on one side than the other side? You know that could be because of the way you part your hair and the way your stylist cut your hair. I always tell clients, if you're parting your hair on either side, meaning you flip it back and forth, then I want to cut your hair down the middle when we layer it, especially layers in the front. That means that they're gonna, when you put it on the middle, all of those layers are gonna be even. And when you bring it to one side, it's gonna be a minimal difference. It will be a little bit uneven, but it shouldn't be too dramatic. Now, if you part your hair on one side all the time, and your stylist cuts it to that side, and then you flip it to the other side, what will happen is it can look like you've got a lot more layers on that one side because that hair has so much farther to travel over the head. Now, another thing is when you part your hair on one dramatic side or the other, what you'll find is those hairs on the top, while they're straight across when you pull it straight up, when they fall down, again, because one side has farther to travel, it's gonna look like you've got more layers on one side than the other. So what I like to do in the salon is actually cut the other side a little bit shorter. So when you pull it up, it looks very uneven, but when you lay them down, how you're gonna wear it, most of the time, unless you stick your finger in a socket and you get your hair to stand straight up, right, most of the time, it's gonna be even. So that is something that you can tell your stylist. If you feel like you're constantly getting your hair layered and it just seems to be a little bit uneven on the sides and there's just more layers on one side, that very well could be where that's coming from. And if they cut that one side a little bit shorter, you'll find it even when you wear it down. Okay, so what I need you to do right now is watch one of these 2 videos because, as I always say, you're gonna learn some good stuff. And it supports the channel. Let's be honest. All right, go do that, and I will see you in the next video.